The setup is right there. You've seen it before. The level held, the volume came in, the candle closed exactly the way your system says it should. Every criterion met, every box checked, and you don't take it. Not because you missed it, not because you were distracted. You were watching the whole time. You saw it form, and something stopped you. Not logic, not a missing condition, not a late signal, just a feeling, a tightening, a quiet voice that said, "What if it doesn't work?" The trade plays out without you. It hits the target, and now you're sitting with a winning trade you didn't take. The analysis was right. The setup was valid. The only thing that failed was the execution. And the reason the execution failed had nothing to do with your strategy. This is the fear of being wrong. And it is one of the most expensive, most invisible, and most misunderstood patterns in trading psychology. Because unlike revenge trading or overtrading, it doesn't show up in your trade log. It shows up in the trades that aren't there. In the valid setups that passed without an entry. In the system that works on paper and stalls in real time. Today we're going into exactly what this fear is, where it comes from, what it's actually costing you, and the part that actually changes the pattern, the specific shift in thinking that makes pulling the trigger feel different. Now, the fear of being wrong in trading is not the fear of losing money. This distinction sounds subtle, but it's everything. Because if you misidentify the fear, every solution you try will miss the target. Losing money is a financial event. It has a specific, calculable cost. The dollar amount risked on a certain trade. A trader who is comfortable with that number, who has genuinely accepted the risk before entering, can take a loss and move on without significant emotional disruption. We covered that process in the emotional trading video. Go give it a watch if you haven't already. The fear of being wrong is an identity event. It's not about the money. It's about what being wrong means. Being wrong means the analysis failed. The read on the market was incorrect. The pattern that looked obvious wasn't. And somewhere beneath the surface of the trading decision, being wrong carries a weight that has nothing to do with dollars. A weight connected to competence, to self-image, to the story the trader tells themselves about their ability to read the market. This is why analysis paralysis hits hardest on the traders who care the most. The ones who have studied the most, prepared the most, and invested the most identity in becoming good at trading. The more you link your self-image to your ability to read the market, the higher the emotional stakes become. Your brain treats this identity threat exactly like a physical one, stepping in to protect you by finding reasons to hesitate. One more confirmation, one more candle, one more piece of evidence that the trade is going to work, before the risk of being wrong is accepted. That weight is the fear in action, and it costs exactly as much as the trades it prevents. To understand why the fear of being wrong produces physical hesitation, the literal inability to click the button even when the analysis says to, you need to understand what the brain is doing in that moment. Anticipating a wrong outcome activates the brain's threat detection system in the same way that physical danger does. The amygdala fires, cortisol begins to rise, and one of the primary behavioral outputs of that stress response, particularly when the threat is uncertain rather than immediate, is freezing. Not fight, not flight, freeze. The brain, unable to determine whether acting or not acting is safer, defaults to inaction as the lower risk choice. This is called inhibitory anxiety. Anxiety that suppresses behavior rather than accelerating it, and it's neurologically distinct from the cortisol-driven aggression that produces revenge trading and overtrading. Both come from the same stress response system, but where overtrading pushes the trader toward more action, inhibitory anxiety pulls them toward less, toward waiting, reassessing, adding conditions, finding one more reason to hold back. There's also a cognitive pattern called loss aversion asymmetry at play here, and it operates slightly differently in the context of missed trades than in losing ones. Research shows that the anticipation of regret is a more powerful driver of avoidance behavior than the anticipation of reward. In plain terms, the brain works harder to avoid the feeling of having been wrong than it works toward the feeling of having been right. The trade that works without you produces a kind of regret, but the trade you take that fails produces a different kind, the one where you made the call and it was wrong. And for traders whose identity is invested in being right, that second kind of regret is the one the brain is most aggressively trying to avoid, hence why one is hesitating to enter a trade. So the hesitation isn't irrational. It's a completely rational response from a brain trying to protect something it values, just not something that actually helps you trade. The protection is identity-driven, not outcome-driven. And the solution isn't to fight the brain. It's to change what the brain is protecting. The reason the fear of being wrong stays invisible for so long is that it leaves no trace in the places traders normally look for problems. The journal shows valid trades managed correctly. The P&L shows no catastrophic losses. The rules weren't broken. On paper, everything looks fine. But the performance data is missing its most important inputs. The trades that met all the criteria and never got taken. And those absent trades are where the real cost lives. Let's make it concrete. A trader's system has a genuine edge. It wins 58% of the time with a 1 to 2 risk-reward on A-grade setups. In a normal week, that system produces 8 qualifying setups. But the fear of being wrong causes the trader to hesitate on 3 of them. They add one more condition, wait one more candle, talk themselves out of entries that their criteria fully supported. They end up taking 5 of the 8. The 3 they missed aren't counted as losses. They don't show up in drawdown. They feel like caution, like discipline, like appropriate selectivity. But run that pattern across a month, missing roughly 12 A-grade setups out of a possible 32, and the system's actual edge is being expressed at about 60% of its theoretical capacity. The account is growing, but at a fraction of the rate the system should be producing. And the gap isn't strategy, it's hesitation. But there's also a psychological cost that compounds over time. Every valid setup that passes without an entry and then moves to target without the trader reinforces a specific and damaging belief: that trading feels too uncertain to execute consistently. The trader begins to experience their own hesitation as normal, as caution, as prudence, rather than recognizing it as the fear pattern it actually is. And a pattern that's been reclassified as a virtue becomes almost impossible to address, because there's nothing wrong with being careful, right? Wrong. When careful means not executing a system that has proven edge because the outcome of any individual trade is uncertain, that isn't caution. That's the fear of being wrong, preventing the system from doing what it was built to do. Now, understanding where the fear of being wrong originates is what makes the fix genuinely work. Because without understanding the root, every solution is just a technique applied over the top of an unaddressed problem. For most traders, the fear of being wrong in the market traces back to one of 2 sources, sometimes both. The first is an outcome-based identity. The trader has built their sense of competence around being right about the market. Good trades confirm ability, wrong trades threaten it. This typically develops gradually, often through a period of early success where the results seem to validate a level of skill that turned out to be partly luck. When the inevitable difficult period arrived, the gap between the identity that had formed and the performance that was happening created the fear of being wrong as a mechanism to avoid further confirmation of that gap. The second is a history of significant losses. A trader who has experienced a genuinely damaging losing period, where the account dropped severely and where the financial consequences were real, carries a memory that the brain treats as a threat template. Future entries that pattern match to the circumstances of those losses trigger the same protective response, even when the setup quality is genuinely different. The hesitation isn't about the current trade at all. It's the brain applying a lesson from a past trade to a present one that shares surface features, but not the underlying risk profile. Both routes produce the same behavioral output: the frozen cursor, the added condition, the missed entry. But they respond to different internal work. The outcome-based identity problem responds to the identity reframe we'll cover in the fix. The historical loss problem responds to a gradual, deliberate rebuilding of trust between the trader and their system through documented evidence accumulated over time. The fix for the fear of being wrong is not courage. It is not discipline. It is not telling yourself to just take the trade. None of those things address the underlying mechanism, which means none of them hold under pressure. The real fix is a fundamental shift in what you're measuring, and it has two specific, practical components. The first is redefining what being right means. Right now, for most traders experiencing this fear, being right means the trade works. The price moves in the predicted direction. The target is hit. Being wrong means it doesn't. And as long as that's the definition, every entry carries the risk of a verdict on competence. Because outcomes are partially outside your control, and being wrong will happen regularly in any probabilistic system. The new definition. Being right means executing a valid setup correctly. Entry at the right level, stop in the right place, size within the rules, thesis clearly defined. That's being right. The outcome, what price does after entry, is not being right or wrong. It's variance. You don't control variance, you control execution. And a trader who executes a valid setup correctly has done everything right, regardless of whether the trade wins. This isn't semantics. It is a structural change in what the brain is protecting. When being right means correct execution rather than correct prediction, the identity threat of a losing trade disappears. You can't be wrong about the outcome because you never claimed to know the outcome. You claimed to have identified a valid setup and executed it correctly. That claim holds regardless of what happens next. The second component is the trading journal, used fully, not partially. Most traders log their trades. Fewer log how they felt during them. But for a trader dealing with the fear of being wrong, the emotional record is the most important part of the journal entry. After every session, you write down not just the setup and the outcome, but what you felt going into each entry. Where you hesitated, what the specific thought was that almost stopped you. Whether the fear showed up as an added condition, a delayed entry, or a setup you identified and chose not to take at all. Over time, this emotional record does something that the trade data alone cannot. It shows you the pattern of the fear itself, the specific setups it targets most, the market conditions where it's loudest, the sessions where it costs the most. That pattern, visible in writing, gives you something concrete to work with, rather than a vague sense that you sometimes hesitate. And the emotional entries that describe clean execution, sessions where the fear was present but didn't govern the decision, become evidence that execution without fear is possible for you. That evidence compounds. Each clean entry makes the next one slightly easier to produce. The third component is a pre-session commitment statement. Before every session, written down in the journal, you complete one sentence. A valid setup is one where, and then list the specific, observable conditions your system requires. Not general principles, specific conditions. And the commitment is, if those conditions are present, I enter. The decision is pre-made. You are not deciding in real time whether this trade is worth taking. You decided this morning when your head was clear. The live session executes the decision. It doesn't make it. Every trader who has ever hesitated on a valid setup knows the specific discomfort of watching it move without them. The frustration isn't just that the trade worked. It's that the analysis was right, and nothing came of it. The skill was there, the execution wasn't. The fear of being wrong doesn't come from weakness. It comes from caring. From having invested real time, real effort, and real identity in becoming a trader who reads the market correctly. That investment is worth protecting. But protecting it by avoiding the trades that would prove it isn't protection. It's sabotage, invisible, justified, and compounding across every session where a valid setup gets passed. Being right in trading is not predicting outcomes. It is executing a process correctly, consistently, across enough trades for the edge to reveal itself. A wrong trade taken on a valid setup is not failure. It is the system working exactly as it should, and the variance doing what variance does. Pull the trigger. Not recklessly. On the setups that meet the standard you defined this morning, because those are the trades you've already been right about, before the entry, when it mattered. What happens after is the market's business, not yours.